You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network, LAFBnetwork.com. We are everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube at LAFB Network, or this is your Rams edition. So you can find this exclusively on Rams LAFB on YouTube as well. Joining me back again after a little break, but he is not even home. Joining me remotely. I mean, we're always remote, but remotely in terms of across the country, my man, the madman, Jamal Madney. What's up, brother? How you doing? I guess you're not overseas, but, not home. How you doing? How you living?
Brother, doing well. I'll be honest with you, it feels overseas. I'm in St. Louis, but I'm sort of by the airport where it feels like it's the end of the world. There's sort of one building I can see outside of my hotel room, and then it's just sort of barren. So I don't know whether I'm in the United States, in another country on earth, but I am calling and we're recording from me in St. Louis, and so excited to be talking Rams with you. Is it ironic that I'm from St. Louis right now, and that's where the Rams came from after the LA stint? So is there some poetic justice happening here based on our conversation of what's to come? Who knows? But excited as always to be with you and get into it.
I was just gonna say, we've been talking before we hit record, and I didn't even make the connection that here we are talking Rams, and you're in the former home of the Rams, and I'm in the current home of the Rams, and we got both fan bases plugged in. So hey, anyone out there listening, depending when you listen, Jamal may still be there or not, but maybe drop some food places Jamal needs to visit in St. Louis. You can text RamsHouse to 31032, or you can hit us up on Twitter. Jamal is at LAFB Jams. You can tell me and I'll relay the message if you want to message me at Ryan Dyrud LAFB. But Jamal, I know you're coming home soon, but maybe if they get to it quick enough, you can get to a nice local food spot out there and not just be stuck with your hotel food.
Please.
Before we get into it,
I'm begging for that. That would be amazing. Excited to sort of discover some hidden gems here.
Did you go anywhere today, or you were just room service in the hotel?
Camped in the hotel, lots of work, lots of things going on. So, I need to kind of even step out, what outside feels like has been about, 36 hours. So, it'll be nice to just step out and find one of these gems.
Well, there you go. So yeah, shoot us a message. RamsHouse to 31032. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Plenty of sports to have some fun betting on. You got the NHL, the NBA, MLB, is in spring training, so opening day is right around the corner. Or you can do futures with college and the NFL. It all happens at betonline.ag. Promo code BELIEVE. Tell the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. All right, Jamal, per usual, the Rams are never boring to talk about. Bad season. It was still plenty to talk about. And then you had Baker Mania. And here we are now going into the offseason. I was in Indianapolis last week. The Rams had no one in Indy and yet still were the talk of the town with everything seemingly happening. And now more news breaking. Obviously, for those that haven't heard, Jalen Ramsey is certainly on the trade block. There is sure a chance he'll be back. We'll get into it. I find it very unlikely. Now coming out that Leonard Floyd ultimately will be gone via either trade or cut, and Allen Robinson has been granted permission to seek a trade, meaning most likely his time in LA is done. So first, Jamal, we'll dive in player by player, then talk big picture, then talk, rebuild, retool, refurbish, whatever you want to call it. But just what's your initial thoughts on these big three names that most notably or most likely will not be in horns next year?
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, it's certainly been surprising when you sort of look at it in terms of individual stories kind of coming at you fast and furious. But I think this is sort of a testament to the Rams organization and Les Snead being the ultimate strategist. And sometimes when you're the ultimate strategist, you see things that aren't there. There's visions that you have to get people to buy into that is in a very non-traditional way. And we think of that as strategy. But another very important piece of strategy is you got to know when to cut your losses as quickly as possible. And there is a sunk cost phenomena That's a behavioral economics principle. That's a football principle. That's a life principle. And what we're really seeing right now is Les Snead acknowledging that the Bobby Wagners of the world, the Allen Robinsons of the world, maybe weren't the best of fits with this roster. And rather than put a round ball in a square peg, let's acknowledge we made a mistake and let's course correct as quickly as possible. And in some of the other cases with Floyd and with Ramsey, I think there's an acknowledgement that let's see if we can get high value back for players that either A, are not going to make a tectonic impact to this team in 2023 and beyond, or B, are really on the cusp of mediocrity. And so let's get them on the open market when their value is the highest, and we can really optimize that deal to our benefit. So what you're really seeing here is Les Snead playing the chess game that he's always played. It's just he's just using different moves. If 2 years ago and all in with Stafford and Ramsey and the others were using the queens and the bishops, now he's using the rooks, he's using the pawns, he's doing other things, but he's still playing that same game of chess to really keep the Rams ahead of the curve. Because at the end of the day, you're either contending, you're one of the 5 or 6 teams that are contending to win it all, or you should really be playing for stockpiling your talent, getting them ready to be in that place. It's really that middle ground is where you're in no man's land. And Daryl Morey used to say that in the NBA, and I think Les Snead has really adopted that. If your team 7 through 22 or 7 through 20, you're really in no man's land. That's where you want to avoid. You want to be in full on kind of replenishing mode, or you want to be in contention.
Yeah, you broke it down great there. And just to kind of piggyback on that, and we'll get into rebuild versus retool or whatever. So I'll probably give some of it away right now, and then we'll go maybe player by player a little bit. But there's this kind of bad connotation with the word rebuild, and it's just automatically assuming like tanking, right? But just piggybacking on what you just said, these moves, which obviously haven't happened yet, but seemingly will happen, Bobby Wagner obviously already did happen, basically signifies that, and I don't think any true fan would disagree with this current roster with all these, even with these stars, was not going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl. It probably would have been a playoff team with everyone healthy, especially in the NFC. But ultimately, with Jalen, with Bobby Wagner, with with Allen Robinson, and with Leonard Floyd, it wasn't constructed correctly to give them the best shot to win a Super Bowl. And so by releasing them, did that give a better shot? Well, that's what we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it just shows that they believe that, where we are not going to get to where we need to be. And every business goes through this. Every company goes through this and says, okay, yes, we were great a year and a half ago. We look similar, but are our pieces performing at that same, execution? Is our expectation and evaluation going to equal the same that it was in 2021 and 2022 and now in 2023? Or have these players aged a little bit, maybe lost a step and now they still have the same name, they still have the same contract, but are we getting the same value for them? And they definitely show that they obviously believe they're not getting the same value, and they can either find more value in younger, different players, or they realize that 2023 is going to be a building year to an extent. Again, we'll get into it more, but really they think in 2024 through maybe 25 and 26 is where they can really hit that final runway of whatnot. So before we get deeper into that, because then that'll bring up conversations about Sean McVay, his future, Aaron Donald, his future, just your thoughts on the individual players. So let's start. Jalen Ramsey. First, over under 10%. He is still on the Rams. And then with that being said, do you like that? Whatever your decision is, do you like that move moving forward for this franchise?
Yeah, Ryan, I think, and I'm sure we'll get into sort of more of the macro effects here. In terms of Ramsey, I think it's under 10% that he comes back next year. And I think it's a good thing. I think that we're at that place now where he is now going to be a mediocre to above average player. And I think the opportunity to get younger, to not just get younger with one player, but to get younger with multiple players. So you're getting youth and you're getting depth in terms of value with a couple of picks for him, and sending him to a team like you and I have talked about that's a piece or two away, where his skill set and his leadership can take a team over the top. That's what you're trying to set up in terms of win-win. But I think you and I have said this now for the better part of a year. We sort of got the edge of Jalen Ramsey's prime in that Super Bowl year. It was starting to fade even in the playoff run. And then last year, we saw it be exposed even more. And when in NFL history has a player been able to reverse course? You know, when you start going from prime onwards, how often can you sort of reverse course and resurrect and have a career year out of nowhere? You know, I mean, how many, Rich Gannons are there? I mean, how many Kurt Warners to a certain extent are there? That's why there's sort of movies about Kurt Warner, because it's a 1 in a million type of situation. So the reality is the train is going one way with Ramsey. I give it less than 10%, and that's the right move.
Yeah, I agree. Less than 10%. The wheels already seem in motion out in Indy. A lot of conversation about it, a lot of interest in Jalen Ramsey. I think just his personality and his style of how he goes about his business, the fact that his name has been in these trade talks, I just can't imagine him wanting to come back to the Rams now. I think he's basically probably meant, and I don't never like to assume how a person acts, so it's hard to say that, but I would have a feeling he's probably mentally moved on and said, okay, it's been fun, LA, love you, but if you are shopping me, I'm ready to be shopped and go somewhere else potentially. And the last thing I'll say,
the one thing I'll say there, Ryan, is there's a couple of different types of archetypes of players. There's the player that shows up every day the same way, regardless of circumstance, and you sort of know what you're getting. And then there's an archetype of player that will behave differently given the circumstance. And Ramsey, for better or for worse, this isn't a criticism, this isn't praise, this is just sort of stating the news here, is more in the latter. When you are on a championship team, when you are in contention, his behaviors are different. He's more engaged. He's more locked in as a leader. He's more constructively vocal. When you are in a situation where you are no longer contending, those same passions are sort of perceived as disruptive behaviors. And he can be a distraction, and he can be challenging in the locker room. We saw creaks of that. Remember, right after the Bucs loss, when Brady marched him down the field out of nowhere, he kind of put the defense on blast there, and it put the offense on blast there, I should say, about, not being able to get a first down basically the whole second half. So Ramsey's one of those guys where it's not always apples and apples with him. You're not going to get the same Jalen Ramsey that you got 2 years ago, regardless of whether he is in his prime or not, because the circumstance sort of drives his behavior as well. And so for that reason, in addition to him kind of maybe having his best football behind him, you got to move on.
Yeah, and so the last thing I'll say too, and we've talked about it a bunch about what kind of value can they get for him, and I still keep seeing a lot of people thinking the Rams can get a first-round pick for Jalen Ramsey. I mean, I'll say this, Jamal. I will donate $100 to the Children's Hospital of LA if the Rams are able to get a first-round pick for Ramsey. Obviously, it'd be fantastic. I wouldn't be mad about being wrong, and then we'll donate some money to the Children's Hospital. So I think you're starting at a second and kind of going down from there based on value we've seen from other players around his age, based on, as you've alluded to, the little bit of downward production. And again, I want to reiterate, we're not saying Jalen Ramsey is a bad player. Like, he's still a very high-level corner. He's just not top one. He's not on an island on himself like he was maybe 2-3 years ago. He is now in that good period, which he still is, as it's constructed, the best corner on this Rams defense. However, if that's the peak he's going to be at for the rest of his career right now, it's probably best to get the highest value you can. I just don't think that's a first round pick, but I would love to be wrong on that because, hey, we could use a first round pick. So that'd be great. All right, moving on. Leonard Floyd, your thoughts on, well, okay, we can put it at 0% because basically they said they're going to shop him. If they can't get a trade, they'll cut him. So he's already been stated he'll be gone. Happy with that move? Don't like the move? Your thoughts?
Yeah, Ryan, I think again, it's a situation where you're trying to retool this defense and you want to kind of get younger, you want to get hungrier, you want to get scrappier under the cap. And I think Floyd is the most interesting case of this whole bunch because he's a guy that at his best can be a double-digit sack guy. He's a guy that can really make a big impact. But I think the decision about Floyd tells me something about the Rams, that they're really big picture thinkers. Because what is the goal, Ryan, of any organization? The goal, everybody thinks that the goal of any organization is to win a championship. It's not, because it's so hard to win a championship that you're trying, you need a lucky break. You need to be healthy at the right time. You need to sort of catch the right wave, the right matchups, the right weather. There's so many things that sometimes are out of your control. The goal of any organization is to maximize your window of contention. What made the Patriots special wasn't that they won 6 Super Bowls. To me, the thing that was most special about the Patriots was that they went to 14 straight AFC championship games. That is the stat to me that was so special about that run and what makes dynasties dynasties. And so when you think about that, what you're saying is, in order for me to maximize contention, I need to minimize my rebuild. And that's essentially what's happening here. The Rams are trying to minimize their rebuilding process. And by getting rid of Leonard Floyd, what they're saying is, yes, this is really good production. But again, he's not going to be a piece that's going to get us into contention. So let's get rid of him. Let's become a more cap-friendly team. So this transition period is only 1 or 2 years, and it's not 8 years and 10 years like some other franchises. And that's really what it's an optimization problem, really, at the highest level. And that, to me, is what is sort of signifying about the Rams, that in many ways, Ryan, they're hedging right now. And they're hedging their bets a little bit. They're like, well, we're going to get rid of some of this high-priced talent where they're getting paid more than what their value is. It's not that their value isn't good, but they're just getting paid more than their value. So it's a seller's market if you look at it from a commodity perspective. But what you still have is you still have a core of Stafford, Kupp, and Donald. And what you're essentially saying is Stafford, Kupp, and Donald with a bunch of young, hungry guys in an NFC where Matt Stafford is the only Super Bowl winner in the entire conference. And Jalen Hurts is coming off of a career year, but we've seen guys like the Cam Newtons, like the Matt Ryans, like the Carson Wentzes have one great year and then never be the same again. And who knows what Hurts is? Is he a one-trick wonder, or is this guy really a sustaining quarterback? Outside of him, can we kind of stay in contention here for this year as a cheaper team, a leaner team in a weaker conference? And then maybe lightning strikes in January and we can make a run. But whether that happens or does not, we're setting ourselves up for the next championship run in a very short period of time, rather than sinking ourselves in with these guys who are on the downward trajectory. And we're going to give 2 or 3 more shots to the roster that we know doesn't have it, and then have a 5, 6, 7 year rebuild. And now you're 10 years removed from any sort of a credible run. So Floyd, to me, is the epitome of this strategy of them saying, look, whether we get something or not, we're going to get rid of him because of the value play there.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've loved what Leonard Floyd has brought. Yeah, I don't think you said exactly what I've been thinking about that move. And when I brought it up, whatever it was 2 weeks ago, it just felt like, unless they believed that everyone on this roster gave them the best shot and they had a really viable chance to win a Super Bowl, now was the time to move on and prepare. So you're not in that 5 year of no man's land, if you will, where all of a sudden 2 years from now, when you lose Donald and Stafford probably retires, McVay leaves, all this, and then you're really in a true rebuild from the bottom up. Whereas now, this, and I'll get to my analogies here in a minute, but they're not a true full rebuild, just like a refurbish, as I like to call it. So last one, this one will be quick because I think we're both I think everyone's probably in agreement here. Allen Robinson, obviously, you were one of the first ones that absolutely hated the signing. You were absolutely dead correct. I didn't hate it. I looked like I was definitely probably wrong. Just never was a fit. You can attribute part of that to just his playing style doesn't really fit in the McVay system very much. McVay likes, good route runners, good blockers. Allen Robinson is a jump ball guy, kind of a deeper threat. You can attribute it to the fact that Matthew Stafford basically missed all of offseason workouts, so there just was never a chemistry built. And then obviously he got injured, Stafford got injured, everyone got injured, blah, 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 blah. But overall, I think, well, okay, I'll ask you, I guess, percentage he'll be gone, and I'm assuming you like the move.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, percentage that he'll be gone. I never like to say 100% for anything. Just life is that way. But it's 99%. And this is no knock on Allen Robinson. It just never was a fit to me from the beginning. And when you got rid of Woods, who was so instrumental to that McVay offense in terms of the nuance, Ryan, in terms of just the ability to get open, find the spaces, all of the pre-snap motion, all the things that he did. Allen Robinson never quite felt like an elite receiver to me. I think he was sort of a fantasy football product more than sort of production on the field with contending teams, because there's a lot of empty yards out there in the second half of games when you're on a bad team. And it seemed that way. So no knock on Allen Robinson. The fit never made any sense. And when the fit is a little bit puzzling to start, that's why training camp is so important and all of the OTAs are so important. And you need to double down on that to build that chemistry that maybe is not obvious that you have right away. And so then when you couple it with the injuries and just not having the time with Stafford, now you're in an incorrect fit without the time to sort of make it better. And then the third element there that kind of goes against Allen Robinson, again, when you talk about value, you can put Van Jefferson as your number 2 receiver. And what am I losing? And you can sort of argue that I'm gaining certain things, because Van Jefferson on the scale of Allen Robinson to Robert Woods in terms of just fit with the McVay offense is much closer to Robert Woods than he is to Allen Robinson. And so when you say, hey, we actually have a very credible number 2 wide receiver here where we can make a run with, why are we having this expensive extra roster spot when we can go and get somebody in the draft or get someone on the cheap and really sort of build out our depth? So for me, this makes sense on all 3 of these dimensions. And again, kudos to the Rams for making the realization, hey, didn't work, and we're going to move on from it right away, rather than, again, this sunk cost phenomena. Hey, we already traded for him. We gave up Woods for him. We've already put in 12 months with him. We fought for him in the media. And, there's an ego thing. And so then you just kind of double down on staying the course because you've already put so much. Tremendous amount of discipline by Les Snead and the organization to move on here. It really shows that they're the right folks to lead this organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating how they're honestly probably one of one among 32 teams that do that just say, we don't care what we sunk into this. Like, we're moving on. We're going a different direction. And they've done it ever since, obviously, probably the first one that truly was recognized as that type of move was with Todd Gurley. There was obviously others in there. You can think of Ogletree, linebacker they signed big and ended up trading him. There's a bit long list, but the true star that they ended up moving on from, and obviously there was injury history and stuff there, I think was Gurley, and they've done it every year since. So yeah, in agreement there. I liked it at the time because of moving on from Woods. I didn't like moving on from Woods, but once you did, and then you add him, it was like, okay, let's see how this works out. And it just didn't work out. Wasn't a fit. And I think now that they can move on and do some different things at receiver, whether that's, I know a pipe dream is bringing back Robert Woods, or if he'd want to come back for obviously a cheap value because, not going to have a lot of money to spend. But I think if they're able to move him, whether it's through trade or a cut, then they'll have some flexibility what they can do there. So let's talk big picture, Jamal. I think as we talk through this, I know we texted very briefly, but I think we're probably going to be very much on the same page with this. I'll start with you and then I'll comment, but just overall on these moves that will happen. The league starts March 15th. So we're about 8 days away, depending on when you listen to this, from the new league year beginning. They have to get under the cap right now, almost 15 million over the cap. So they got to get under that before then, and then can obviously make moves during that time. Then obviously the draft is after that. So seeing and hearing what's probably going to happen, just your overarching big picture macro thoughts on where this team is and where they go from here into the season.
I think, Ryan, it's again, I think it's a hedge, and it's a really smart hedge. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to rebuild on the fly, and they're trying to minimize it to 2023 and 2024. And I think a lot of it also has to do with what's around them. And we talked about kind of a relatively weak NFC. If I can take Stafford, I mean, we're living in a world where Carr just got $100 million guaranteed from the Saints. There's just such few guys that can play this position well that, I mean, you've got 24, 25 teams that are looking for a quarterback. We're living in a world where Geno Smith got 3 years and over $100 million and had a very good year, faded considerably the last half of the season. Didn't matter. First 8 games were good enough. 9 games were good enough to say you're a $100 million man. Like, that's the state.
Let me say real quick.
Right now. Please.
Sorry to cut you off, but just because you brought him up, and I'm super happy for Geno. Hats off to him for what he's done in his career, but that was the best thing possible for the Rams, that they decided that that's their long-term option at quarterback. By far the best. Like, Rams fans should be rejoicing. So go ahead.
Absolutely, because the Seahawks are going to be paying for that contract by about week 7 of the 2023 season. Love Geno, love the story, love his line. I didn't ring him back. Everyone thought, phoned me in, and I didn't ring him back. I didn't call him back, and everyone wrote me off, and I didn't write him back. So love him, love the story. He got his bag. I'm so happy for him. He's going to have a great life, but he is not a long-term solution to a championship team. And it just shows how desperate the market is. And I think it goes back to something I've been saying. I think we're in an era right now where the number of elite quarterbacks in the league is the thinnest and the smallest that it's ever been. And that's all to say that if you have a Matthew Stafford, you're going to give yourself a chance. Not necessarily Stafford is with that arm and that ability. I've never been a huge Stafford guy, but given what is around this position right now, I think Matt Stafford just by default is like a top 6 quarterback, top 7 quarterback in the league right now. You would have a hard time giving me 7 guys credibly that you believe deep in your heart is better than Matt Stafford. So with that as a fundamental reality, and then you've still got Cooper Kupp, who for my money is the best receiver in football still, but we can argue he's at least top 3, no question about it. And then you've got the best defensive player in the world in Aaron Donald. You've got 3 great pillars, and you're saying, hey, if I can around these 3 guys get younger, get hungrier, get leaner, get meaner, get scrappier, and have a bunch of guys playing on their rookie contracts, small contracts with a chip on their shoulder to try and get the big bag with what's around me in the NFC, I'm collecting picks, I'm getting under the cap, but I'm still in contention. And then let's see what happens in 23. If 23 is another 5-12, or if 23 is another year where they're just nowhere close to being in consideration, where they're not kind of a playoff team, and then you never know what happens in the NFC, and it's one game, and maybe you catch some breaks and get a nice draw, and maybe you make a deep run. But if it's closer to what it was this year, then I see this time next year, Ryan, Donald will be traded, Stafford will be traded, and then you're going to get even more picks coming back for 24. Yeah. Hopefully you're in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. You can trade up. He's got his rookie year in 24, and now you've got kind of a year 2 Caleb in 25, and you're back on the rise again. There's energy again in the building, and now all of these picks and all these young guys that you sort of invested in on cheap contracts or draft picks are now ready to be stars, and now you're back. So when you sort of look back, you say, hey, our rebuild window was actually only 2 years. And at the same time, we sort of did it on the fly where we kept the door open by hedging that, hey, if lightning kind of strikes and we make a run, let's make a run right here and now. But we're minimizing the time to the rebuild, and we're minimizing the time of being really, really bad. So from a big picture standpoint, I love where they're going. Yeah,
you said a couple things really, really good there. And I'll kind of talk about the first, talk about the second, because I see it the same way. I see it as there's plan A and there's plan B. And plan A, certainly, in my opinion, is this thought that we can move on from these high profile, big name players, big contract players that are not necessarily top in talent. And this is no disrespect, but I don't think even today, I don't think anyone's calling Leonard Floyd even a top 20 edge rusher. Very good player. You know, he steals the edge good. He can go good against the run, tall, lanky. But at this day and age, I don't think he's a top 20 edge rusher. Jalen Ramsey, obviously fallen off a little bit. Allen Robinson, not a top 20 receiver right now. So they're big name guys, big contract guys, but they can move on and get some value for them. So you look at that, and as I brought about in the very beginning of the show, Jamal, there's this negative connotation about rebuild. And it's like everyone automatically assumes rebuild is you're stripping it down to the studs to stink essentially for a year or two to go get a top 3 quarterback, right? Which obviously we've talked about, like, hey, pipe dream, Caleb Williams stays in LA, plays for the Rams, and you would probably need to stink in 2023 for that to happen, or at least be relatively bad where you have some allocation to move up. But then what I think the Rams are doing, you can call it rebuild, I like to call it refurbish, is that they're tearing down some of the I guess bad features of the house that you spend a lot of money on, right? Like, okay, we put in this real fancy deck that just doesn't fit right, or it's not up to code, and we're getting crap from our HOA, and we put in this really nice wainscoting that we just really want to adjust now and make different. But you're not tearing the whole house down and starting over. You're just kind of adding some different pieces that still make it look nice in the end. And everything you said about the NFC is absolutely true. I mean, this is the year to do it because you can sneak in the playoffs most likely at 9-8. And then I look at teams like, I've heard some people saying, comparing to the Chiefs, which I don't think is fair, but saying like, oh, well, look, they got rid of Tyrann Mathieu, or not, didn't get rid of, but they didn't re-sign him. Oh, they traded Tyreek Hill, and they were able to go to the Super Bowl. Now, it's a little unfair because you have a guy like Pat Mahomes, and I think Matthew Stafford's very good, but he's no Pat Mahomes. But probably a better example of this, and again, they have a little better quarterback too, but a better example, look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Back-to-back years, number 1 overall picks, and they won a playoff game last year. So there is no reason why, and they don't have a ton of star power. I mean, they got their Christian Kirk as their star receiver, and they've got some very good and nice players on defense, and obviously a lot of guys in the draft. So it starts with moving on, rebuilding a little bit through some of these guys, and then obviously the big elephant in the room is they got to hit their draft this year. Like, that's probably the biggest key, is they have to hit their draft, whether it's with 6 picks, 8 picks, 10 picks, whatever they end up with. They got to hit on a lot of these players, whether it's 2023 or in 2024 when these guys become year 2, and then they're really back in contention with that core, as you alluded to. So I think that's plan A, is compete in 2023. As you mentioned, I think with who they have, even with getting rid of some of those guys, I think they can make the playoffs. And obviously you're going to get some draft picks. You're going to get some free agents. I think the NFC is just that bad. And I mentioned signing Geno Smith was probably the best thing for them. So many question marks with the Cardinals. And oh, guess what? The 49ers are probably the favorite. They don't know who's going to play quarterback still. Like, to this day, they have no idea who's starting at quarterback week 1. So I think the Rams are really in a good spot, ironically enough, with these moves and with that. So that's plan A, which I think is what they're hoping to happen. And then it catapults them 2024 and beyond. And that'll give them, let's say 2024 to 2026 is their final window, which I'm stretching a little bit, but with Donald, Kupp, Stafford, McVay, I don't know if it lasts that long, but I think if they can get to that peak in 2024, it might give them another year or two. Now, like you alluded to, plan B, if this refurbish ends up being they hired a real bad contractor, did a real shoddy job on this new wainscoting, and new deck refurbish was even worse than the initial one, and it really just end up in a bad place. Well, then yes, then it becomes, okay, we won 5 games. Now we're selling the farm in the 2024 offseason. We're getting Caleb Williams in the draft, and it might be time for a new head coach. Not saying because they want McVay out, but he might say, okay, that was enough. I'm moving on, and we go for that route. But I think there's no way, because obviously Rams Twitter is very split on this. If people are like, wow, what are they doing? They have no plan or whatever. There's no way McVay, in his unknowingness of coming back for sure, didn't have a conversation with Les Snead and company about what the future was going to look like and what they were going to do. and then decide to come back. Like, they definitely talked about all this. Like, what does 2023 look like? What is your dedication to this organization in terms of how many years you want to be here? Is this a last year thing where we need to go all in this year for your last year? Or is this a 2 to 3 year thing where we can do this refurbish and hopefully those last 2 years of your tenure here we're back to where we want to be peak wise. So I think it's absolutely something they've planned. They've talked about. We saw it at the beginning of the offseason, which with the 6 coaching changes, I mean, that was just the beginning of this overhaul. And then now we're seeing with in some of the big name guys moving on. And so for Rams fans out there that are concerned or think that they're just flying with their heads cut off or whatnot, I would argue it's the complete opposite. And they're being very poignant and very decisive on what they believe is the right course of action. And Jamal, it sounds like me and you are in agreement that it is the right choice.
Absolutely, Ryan. And 2 things there. One is, this is the perfect year for McVay. For a guy who's sort of teetering on whether he's burnt out or not, 23 is the absolute perfect year because you're saying, okay, I'm going to kind of skinny up and I'm going to see what I have. And if we have enough to then sort of build on and go more, that sort of gives you energy of being an underdog again and having that upward trajectory. And if you see that the bottom has kind of fallen out, 23 will be McVay's last year before he takes a break and decides what he wants to do next, from a TV perspective. So you've given him the perfect inflection point to decide. This is probably the most ideal coaching scenario for him, believe it or not, given kind of where he is in his life. I think coaching a contender would be too much pressure. And I think coaching, given just how much pressure he puts on himself and where he is right now in terms of his life, and coaching a cellar dweller would give him no purpose and no aim, and he would just be depressed as hell trying to coach that team. So this is the perfect situation for him. And the second point I want to make, Ryan, for all the fans that are sort of concerned that there's sort of chaos abound, the Rams are ahead of schedule. They won. The whole all-in initiative of what made less need was with the idea of, we're going to bring this great talent. We're going to kind of manage the future. We're giving ourselves a 3-year window. Can we win a ring? They won the ring in year 1. They were ahead of schedule. They didn't even need the full 3-year window to win the ring. It worked. They were successful. It was a home run strategy. And so now, rather than saying, why waste year 3 of this window when we know we've already won, and now guys have gotten their money, they've gotten their ring, they've gotten a little older, they're a little too content. Let's now accelerate the next wave, the next all-in phase, and go faster on that piece. So the fact of the matter is, the Rams are ahead of schedule to build the next championship team. And so for anyone that thinks they don't know what they're doing, you should all be thrilled as to where the direction of this team is going, because again, they're setting up 23 now. They're rebuilding on the fly. Let's see. If it works, it doesn't work. They get to 9-10 wins, you're going to add more pieces. If you're at 5 or 6 wins, or let's say Stafford gets hit around again and those offensive line targets don't work out, it's a similar situation. He absolutely is going to get traded for a huge market given the state of where the quarterback position is. And Aaron Donald's going to get traded absolutely for a ton of value because he's going to be on the last year of his contract, and everyone's going to see if they can strike lightning in a bottle with how great his ceiling is. So you're in such a great position regardless, and you're leaning in to the next wave because you were ahead of schedule. You already won. And so for anyone that thinks that they need to be concerned about the Rams, please don't be. This is the best managed team in football outside of maybe the Chiefs right now because they have Patrick Mahomes. This is an organization and a management team that is really thinking about multiple championships.
This is the most optimistic I think I've heard you ever about the Rams. I'm impressed. And we're in a total agreement. And with how much doom and gloom is on.
It's smart.
It is.
It's smart decision making. My biggest problem with last offseason, I'll be honest with you, in terms of everything I heard, the conversations we had, they were the wrong decisions, but we sort of swept them under the rug because we were still on the honeymoon period with Les Snead. Well, here's the guy who can do no wrong, and everything has sort of come up blackjack. Now, if I turn my brain on, I don't really see how these moves are going to work. But you know what? The guys come up blackjack on everything, so let's just buy in and let's be on the bandwagon, and we all sort of shut off our brains a little bit as fans, as analysts, because of the success that they had. That was my biggest gripe about last offseason, and it came out to fruition. Now it's time to turn the brains back on. And when you're looking at what they're doing, given the situation that they're in, it's very smart. It's very intelligent management and strategic thinking.
Yep. No, absolutely. I mean, I fell into that category last year. So, and I agree with you that this is absolutely, I think, the right thing to do. And I know it sucks for fans when you fall in love with these players. But the Rams have proven time and time again, like they're going to move on. I don't care what jerseys you have. They don't care who's a fan favorite. They're going to do what they think is best in the chess game they're playing. And this certainly seems like a very, very good move from us for sure. And we'll dive way more into it throughout the offseason. Obviously, it's going to be extremely exciting here in a week when the new league year starts, and see what they're able to do. And obviously to see how these moves, if they end up being pre-June 1st cuts, post-June 1st cuts, if they can find a trade partner for Floyd or Robinson and get some picks back, which would be pretty amazing. Let's end with this because we're getting up against it. What kind of, if there is any, which I think ultimately Floyd and Robinson will end up being cut. I don't know if they'll have a huge trade market, but the wide receiver market is very bad this free agency. I mean, it is a very bad free agent market. So he could have some value there. And Leonard Floyd is coming off, he's a solid, reputable pass rusher that a team might not want to have to go into a bidding war with another team if they can just give up a late round pick. So what kind of value do you think each could garner on the trade market? Are we looking at 6 and 7s? Are we looking at 3 and 4? Are we looking at 1-4, 1-5? What do you think? Obviously, I haven't even dove into that. I know you haven't either.
I'll be honest with you. I think it's such a commodity that it'll be, anything you can get. You can get a 7 for Floyd, take it. And anything better than that is better than that. To me, I think there's real value in Robinson because I think there's enough teams that'll say, look, there were still some big years he had with the Bears. There were some big years there when he had with the Jaguars when they were bad, and we kind of fit him in to our system, be a wide receiver number 2, be a guy that can kind of make an impact. I could see Allen Robinson get a 3 or a 4, to be honest with you, for the right team in the right circumstance. So, given the state of that market, like you alluded to, I think the wide receiver market in the draft, there's really high-end talent. And then once you kind of get into that 3rd round, 4th round and beyond, I think you'd probably rather have Allen Robinson than any one of these draft picks, truthfully. So I think there's a 3 or a 4 there that you could get with Robinson. And when you're looking at needs, especially on offensive line, when you're looking at kind of trenches, now you got to bulk up on this front 7. That would be a hell of a coup if you could potentially get let's say a 4 for Allen Robinson and a 7 for Floyd. Close your eyes and take that, Rams fans, and we can sort of move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you look at the receiver market, I mean, your top 2 free agents right now are probably Odell Beckham Jr. and Michael Thomas, who are obviously great names, but the injuries are there and there's so much unknown with those guys. After them too, I mean, it's probably Robert Woods. It's probably your number 1 free agent. And obviously we love Robert Woods, but that shows that there may be a good market for Allen Robinson. There may be a team willing to take on that. He's got 30 mil left over 2 years, 15 mil a year or so, which is a high end, but not egregiously high for a good receiver if he adds value to what you need, which he can, like you alluded to, for a specific team that needs that specific skill set. And is a true contender. And Floyd, I agree. If you can get any draft pick for him and someone's willing to take that contract on, you don't even bat an eye. You say, deal. Yes.
Drive him there. Pay for the move. Carry his luggage, carry the furniture. If you could do that, absolutely. Anything you could get for Floyd, I think is a coup there, Ryan. And again, I think that for everyone that's sort of concerned about this, this was a team. Ask yourself this question when you're in sort of your sort of most solitary place where you can be the most honest with yourself. Was this team even constructed? Did you really believe this was a multiple Super Bowl champion team? I think we all thought of this group as there was a 3-year window to win a ring. There was no element of dynasticism to this team ever. I know there's always sort of the honeymoon period after you win it, and you think you're just going to kind of go back and win it again. But never at one point did I think this team was going to be a multiple-time Super Bowl champion. And so you reach the pinnacle, you reach the ceiling, you maxed out your strategy, and now you're getting the gift of time back because you don't have to waste a year 3 on strategy A, the original strategy. You're now going to the next strategy 1 year earlier. So this is actually a great period in Rams history, and I think we'll look back on it 2, 3, 4 years from now as saying, man, that was really a key point in this whole transition to get us back into contention.
Well, it's very all in with this, and I'll let you respond if you want to, but it's very similar vibes to 2019. I mean, 2018, they go to the Super Bowl, they lose. They obviously lose some pieces, they make some adjustments, but they kind of have that run back mentality in 2019 with some different moves. 2019, still a winning season, but missed the playoffs. And then they kind of shifted focus and really did an overhaul on what their talent was. And then it built up to where obviously we were in the 2022 Super Bowl run. So it has that feeling now. This is that 2019 offseason where they're going to retool for that next big move. And, you know, hey, if it's, what was it, 3 years between Super Bowls? I mean, that's not bad in reality. If we can have one, basically we had last year was a down year, this year a playoff year, and then the next year a Super Bowl. I mean, I think those are good steps to take as an organization, unless you can have that Pat Mahomes or Justin Herbert, or that Tom Brady at 22 years old, that you're set. Love Stafford, but 35 years old, they're not going to get that. So they have one more run with Stafford, and then from there we'll readjust. But I don't know if you have anything you want to add with that before I sign us off.
What a model that would be, right? I mean, every 3 years you're sort of back in the Super Bowl or on the cusp, and you're always assessing that way. How many teams can say that, Ryan? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. You know, it's on one hand, I mean, look at some of these iconic franchises like the San Francisco 49ers. It's been 30 years since they won a Super Bowl, essentially. Look at the Cowboys. It's been 30 years. Look at the state of the Steelers right now. I mean, it's been, 10 plus years since the Steelers have felt like the Steelers. It's been 10 plus years since the Ravens have felt like the Ravens. Look around the league. Look at your beloved Denver Broncos. I mean, 3 Super Bowls, 2 iconic quarterbacks, and then when they don't have those guys, it's really tough sledding. It is so hard to win in this league, where if you can come up with a model where you're potentially at the Super Bowl or on the cusp of the Super Bowl every 3 years, I don't know if there's a franchise this side of a Tom Brady-led or Pat Mahomes-led team in the last 30 years that can say that. So we are far and away ahead of the curve.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. So we'll have plenty more. We'll be back into the week. We'll see if any of these moves have happened by then, and we can really break them down. But I think it's exciting times. It's fun as always for a Rams offseason, and we can't wait to bring you all the best coverage at the LA Football Network. So for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dowd. Ramley, take care. We'll talk to you all in just a couple days.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.